dragon, we see what is believed to be at that moment the biggest dragon, Vhagar. At the moment online, this is the size comparison that we have for Vhagar compared to the other dragons of the universe that we know of so far. And also for some perspective, you can see the human beings in the far corner down there to get an idea of how big the dragons are in comparison. Now I gotta be honest, while I was doing this video, I didn't know how big she was. I could only go off of what I saw via the perspective whenever Aemon was on her back, or how big she is in comparison to Aemon riding her, who we can see right there is a bunch of pixels on her back. This dragon is massive. I mean, just for her to take flight seems like an arduous task with all that mass that she has to constantly lift. So you know how I like to compare animals? With such a gigantic fire-breathing flying creature like Vhagar, I just had to wonder how she would fare against something else that's very large, such as a kaiju. The Monsterverse is filled with kaiju interactions, and most of all, kaiju fights, as we've seen in the Kong and Godzilla universe. And one of my favorite kaiju is our guy Kong. How would Kong from Skull Island deal with a dragon like Vhagar from House of the Dragon? First thing to note is that Kong hails from a place called Skull Island. This place is known for its eccentric wildlife that basically just look like supersized mutated creatures who were other versions of our real life creatures, otherwise known as part of Australia. Every creature there is designed to kill and likewise has to adapt to survive. They are large but also very powerful. Surviving in this place is not for the faint of heart. For regular humans, it would be a nightmare. But what about large reptilian creatures like dragons? First of all, for a large dragon like Vhagar that can breathe fire, you're already invited to the cookout. You would fit right in with all of these other creatures that can paralyze you, trample you, eat you whole. I mean, this place is literally a monstrous nightmare. And if you're not prepared, you never know where death is going to come from next. I mean, they have birds that literally slice you into tender little bite-sized bits while in the air. Creatures like Kong and the other creatures that live in the hollow earth or are used to this type of ecosystem pretty much know how to deal with these things because they're used to it. Then again, they're fighting and killing each other all the time, so. I think the first order of business before we pit Kong and Vhagar up against each other is to set the stage for the interaction. Vhagar is a type of creature that typically doesn't bother other creatures unless they are a nuisance to her or unless she's hunting for food. Chances are she wouldn't see Kong as food. Why? Because dragons in the Game of Thrones universe are very intelligent, and Vhagar isn't stupid. Kong has fought flying things before. These titanic hollow earth cobra things, called the Warbat, have tussled with Kong. They're essentially dragons in this world, and look how large they are. Even still, a creature like Kong is very formidable to them. Kong doesn't have any venom or other weapons, but he can use weapons because of his intelligence and dexterity. His big arms are useful for pushing things, building things, punching his enemies, and of course, more iconically, ripping them to shreds. Imagine if this wasn't green blood and it had been red, how visceral it would have looked and how much more intimidating. Now, the reason why I said Vhagar isn't stupid is because right now, everywhere that I have searched for in terms of Kong's height in the Monsterverse as of the Godzilla and Kong Empire movie shows, despite the discrepancies and scaling issues that we see, that Kong is about 337 feet tall. Other people claim he's 335. So let's say that he's 335. I looked at the actor for Aemon as we see him in the later seasons, and the actor, Ewan Mitchell, is said to be 5 feet 10 inches. This is how he would look next to a standard horse and a fully grown house cat, just for some perspective. Now we take that horse next to Ewan Mitchell, or Aemon as he's called in House of the Dragon, and put it next to Vhagar. This is correct to scale based on what I've seen, and Vhagar is estimated to be about 123 feet tall at the highest point of her shoulder. shoulders, or withers as we call it on a horse. So given that we know these stats of his height to the dragon's height, let's put it next to Kong, who is about 335 feet tall to 337, depending on who you ask. In that range, regardless, this is what we're gonna have. Boom. Kong is towering over Vhagar. The dragon is tiny compared to Kong. And we see this perspective mirrored in the movies. In Kong Skull Island, Kong was smaller. He was around 104 feet, so he would have still been around Vhagar's size, and that would have been bad enough. The dragon would have been a bit taller than him, but a perfect match for him. So yes, Vhagar isn't stupid. She would see this thing and realize, I'm not an idiot, I'm gonna stay away from that. Regardless if I can blow fire on it or not, probably not a good idea to do that with things that have hands and can throw shit at me out of the sky. But yes, for scenario's sake, let's say that she is stupid, and she decides to fight Kong without a rider hindering her. She sees him as a threat, and the first order of business is to stay from a distance and burn Kong with her fire, because that's what she would do in any other situation. Stay from afar and light up her opponent. Dragon fire is very hot. So from what we've seen, Kong is not immune to fire, and we see that dragons kind of have that oily liquid stuff similar to what we see in Skull Island when they light Kong up. Clearly it hurts him. He has been burned before. However, while he's in the midst of this flaming, merciless inferno, he doesn't seem to be as flammable, but he does get hurt so badly that he passes out. Mind you, he was also in the water while this happened, and I don't think he passed out because of the burns. I think he passed out because of the smoke. Vhagar would continue lighting him up. If she decided to stay in the battle, she would keep making passes at him and doing this methodically, like a machine. And since Kong is much larger than Vhagar, there wouldn't be any need to ambush him because she can see him. And it's not like he can get away easily, even though he could move out the way. Kong also wouldn't just stay there and get burned, especially when he notices that Vhagar can blow fire. The only way that Vhagar would win this fight is if she flees from it, because eventually Kong would either leap out of the sky or throw something at her. Despite his enormous size, we've seen that Kong has the ability to run very fast and jump very far as well. One more pass that this dragon would do, he would either throw her out of the sky, or as we've seen, beat the shit out of her until she gets grounded. And look how big he is. He's able to maneuver perfectly fine, and this old dragon still has a difficult time getting off the ground. Of course, this is within the realms of this universe, where flying creatures that are this large usually don't exist or are not the norm. The titanic monstrosities that we see in Skull Island are, unfortunately for Vhagar, just built different. And so after Vhagar had been knocked from the ground, Kong would waste no time on her next pass, when she finally gets grounded, to tear her to shreds. First order of business for a creature like this would either be to rip her head off or rip her wings off, but seeing that she can breathe fire, and he knows that would be an issue, he would tackle the head first. See how he made quick work of these war bats? And these are about his size, way larger than Vhagar. Vhagar is not equipped to handle this fight. Fire or no fire, Vhagar would lose.